Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is Justin and Max.
Hi.
And we're going to be doing a, I guess we can call it a review. We're not exactly sure if we did most of the game right, but nonetheless, after doing one play, Feudum.
We just did one playthrough, and we probably got 94% of the rules incorrect.
I think we did pretty well.
So, if we,
I think we got about 80% of it right.
Because if we review something incorrect, feel free to tell us what we did wrong.
And I will say that I really enjoyed my experience playing the game.
Mm-hmm.
I had printed out some player aids and some cheat sheets, and we had
We actually didn't really use them.
I used it a little bit, and then they have the instruction book. There are a couple teeny-weeny ambivalent things, and I wish the writ cards on the back were a little bit better explained. Some of the iconography can be really teeny-tiny, and some of it can be a little bit ambivalent as well. Especially the bubbles and that kind of stuff on the board.
That's also, that's a little, like, the art is nice, but not functional.
Some of it is not so functional.
Because, like, especially, like, one space where it's, like, on the line, it's like, whoa.
Which area does it?
And then, like, the different lines in the water, like, birds, bubbles, waves.
And it constantly is talking about, like, you have to put something on south, southwest, north, northeast.
And, like, we're, like, looking at all of them.
Yeah, those things should have been, like, really prominent. And I understand they didn't want it to interrupt the flow of the game. I like the mechanism for how the game ticks down, because you're rolling die to see which tile moves away, and also when you're upgrading you're improving a land that you own. You
also take a tile.
So that will kind of ramp up the game. So I did a lot of upgrading of improving of my lands, and you guys didn't do as much. We played 3-player in this first time. Well, let's talk a little bit about what the pushing and pulling aspect of the game is.
So, the pushing and pulling is actually really cool. It's where, if you're, like, the head of one, you can push stuff, or stuff that's on that board, and push it to the next one.
Right, so there are 6 guilds in the game.
Yes.
And they're all intertwined and intermixed. And it's actually important where they're on the board, because they all connect. So when you're doing this thing called a push action, which I've never seen in any other game,
is you take resources or whatever it happens to be from one and move it on to the next one,
and get some points for doing so.
And get some points. Or if you're second in command in one, instead of
you could pull them.
Yeah, you could pull them from the previous one that someone else could push to you and get a little bit less points, but you can still score points.
And the way sometimes if you're paying money, you have to pay to the opposite side of the board.
And if you buy something from, let's say, if you buy a bead from the monk and other people are there, you have to pay them.
Right, depending on who has influence there.
It's $3 for the bead, but the money will be dispersed to the people that are there.
Right, and anything that's left over goes into the purse that's across the board.
Side, which is the farmer.
There's a lot to remember in the game. Let's put it that way.
Yes.
And they use the term sandbox game with this.
I guess it actually kind of fits, because you can literally do anything.
You could do anything. You can my strategy in the game, not knowing how to play the game so much, I worked on improving the territories that I had up until they actually became feudums, which gives you power in the various guilds. You worked primarily on farms. In fact, the times that you did upgrade places, you upgraded them to
farms.
So he had this whole farm thing going all over the board.
I had like 6 farms in a row.
And so when you did a harvest, you got a lot more as a result of that.
And then therefore getting a lot more into my area. So I was actually never had to worry about what resources, because the original one I placed on the board was the farmer. So I always
gets to choose.
Eventually, every turn or every round, I got to choose 3 resources that I want. Any 3. I could be I want that one, and one of those.
And what if I don't have any power in one of the guilds? But you do, and Mom does. Well, I could always go next to you with one of my characters.
And push into it
to get points. And then I can use a sulfur cube to do a feast.
Yes.
That's very cool.
Because it's, if you're pawn, which I think is a very interesting idea, because it looks just like a die, but you just choose one to be face up, and that's what it is.
Yeah, that's what your guy is.
And then the sulfur action is if your pawn is in the same space as an opponent's pawn, you can spend a sulfur or a yellow cube and use the guild card, and then you can use one of their guild actions anywhere on the board.
Right. So even if you don't have influence in one place, you can kind of gain it through a different way, and you get some extra points for doing so. You just don't get the bonus cards. Right, and those bonus cards, let's bring over a couple bonus cards. What are they called? Explorer cards?
There's two different types of Explorer cards. There's ones that have a red seal on them.
The seal is already there. You can use it anytime.
Those are, you could spend it if you have the requirements. Some of them do. And then you get to use that action at any point in your turn.
Those can be very powerful. Like, some of them can give you resources, some of them give you money, some of them give you weapons, which aid in conquests.
And then some of them have a empty seal, where it's endgame scoring, and you have to spend one of your seals, put it on there, and now you can use that bonus.
And there's a lot of different ways of getting things in the game. You can get seals in different ways.
Because, like, everything you could either buy, trade, push, pull to get, and then, like, cards will get you, like, there's literally 5 ways to do everything.
And that's a little bit of the sandbox idea of it. One of the other things I really like about the game is, in so many games where you're trying to vie for area control or the most influence on something, well, now you get all the stuff. In this game, if you don't have the most influence in a territory, you could still act as a serf in that area, and then
you can use
these little land tiles,
which are the little tiles that we talked about earlier that will tick down the rounds, and then you could play them, and you'd place your little serf on it, and that would give you an ability for the rest of the game.
Right.
And that ability, you would use it, but then a little bit would go to the person controlling the tile.
Right. So there's well, do I want to take the points and get what's on the tile and give a little bit to you, or do I just want to let it grow, like a little bit of interest in a certain way? Because eventually, at the beginning of an epoch, I can take all the stuff off, and I still only have to give one, no matter how much is on there. So you can get money, you can get influence, and you can get food. You can get the green tiles as well, the green squares, which feed your people. Nothing is left out of the game. Like, you have the big islands, you have the small islands, you have these fantasy airships,
which will allow you to travel faster around the board and in different ways, or you could use submarines or normal boats to travel upriver into the board, or travel quickly around the island area, which was my kind of area.
Right, you went around the islands. You expanded. I didn't expand so much in the game. I really just worked on...
Because at the end of the game,
I had feudums.
Controlled 3 territories, 2 of which are feudums.
2 of which are feudums.
And then you had some serfs and some others.
Right. So for me, it was not trying to expand too much. It was trying to consolidate power in a couple of areas. And also those, the Explorer cards, the ones where they give you, different abilities. Some of them are endgame bonuses. So that sometimes may steer you in a strategic direction. You might say, I'm going to hold on to this one. Now I could explore in these various places. Another aspect of the game that I really enjoyed is that at every stage you had a choice. When you receive a tile, you could say, because I improved an area, I could use that tile as any good, or I can later on to make a little bit of a land mass for one of my serfs.
I actually had a bunch of tiles at the end of the game that I couldn't use because I didn't need any resources.
Right, you were gaining the resources.
And I controlled all the territories that I was involved in.
Yeah, that's true. So those tiles became sort of...
I get this.
These little squares, these little resource cubes, I realize now in the game that you should be very economical with them. You don't need more than you really need. And there's different ways of getting influence markers.
So you can get influence from going to the knight, which is or the trade action.
Right, the trade action with the knight.
You spend $3, and then some of it will go away.
And you get the whole row of whatever you got up there.
You get the whole row of your color, and in order to get your row to expand, you have to go over here and build barrels. With
the alchemist. The alchemist has got to fill barrels with stuff. I forget what the word is that they used for it. Crud.
Crud.
Or maybe, I don't know. It says it's a Viking word or a Danish word. Maybe it's crude, which would make sense. Like, it's crude material that you're putting into the barrels to gain you influence with the knights, and then the knights can work with the royalty, and the royalty works with the monks, and the monks works with the farmers, and the farmers works with the merchant, and the merchant
works back to the
alchemist. Boy, it was You know, the thing is, I had a fantastic time with it, and I feel like the more I'll play this, the more fantastic time I'll have with it.
There was one other thing that I wish was included more, because it's two things that are very, very well designed, but are almost hardly used.
Yeah.
If I grab them out. These guys. These
are monsters.
These are monsters, and the only way you can get them is by going to the knight, and instead of taking 3 whole influence, which is very good.
That's a lot, yeah.
You have to give it up, throw it away, to take control of one of these guys, place it out somewhere. This guy can go up rivers or in the sea, on land, obviously.
And they're so cool.
They're so cool looking. They're amazing. They're nice.
I guess in our game, we were still learning so many of the mechanics that was like the last thing to think about, and it just didn't come up too much.
Even when our third player got was able to use one of these, she was down on influence because she gave up those 3.
Yeah, she gave up influence in order to get.
And we figured out that these are actually pretty weak because they can do everything a pawn can do, except the good things a pawn can do.
Like putting an influence,
which is a very important.
They help support battles,
and
you could pilfer things.
And we did a total of like 2
battles, and the only reason I had to do battles was
because you had a
Feudums, right? And Feudums force you to battle. Otherwise, you lose points.
But they just look so cool.
But I guess the 2 fantasy elements are the 2 monsters, this Loch Ness monster guy and this unicorn abominable snowman, I'll call him that. And then the other fantasy part of the game is that even though this is medieval, we have these balloon airships and these submarines and as well like just regular ships, but the ships themselves look like they're from like, 1750 rather than, 1150.
And then there's 2 things I want to mention on the art. One of them I already covered a little bit was how the board's a little confusing with the iconology, where it's like the bubbles and the water interlocking. It just looks like patterns.
Right.
And then one more thing. And the other thing I wanted to cover was, do you see how the unicorn...
You said the other thing I want to cover.
Yeah. The other thing I want to cover was how you could see this abominable snowman unicorn, as you call it, was reaching over the hill to scaring people. And one thing that is a very, very nice touch is on the inside of the box.
Hashtag see our unboxing of the game.
Yes. You can see how it's the back of that image.
Right, so they're kind of, you're seeing it from inside out and so forth. And I think the box make it look like that the monster is really a really big part of the game.
But it's not.
And again, it's not so much. One thing that we did use, and we looked at some videos and asked looked at online some things, is anytime you either upgrade one of your territories or you capture a new territory, all of the numerical values of what you control change.
So what we ended up using was die. And we turned them up and down to rank them. Because if someone upgrades, let's say, a farm into a city, all of their farms go down, which is 2, and all of the cities go up, which is 2.
Right, because that's another, how intertwined this game is. You have 6 characters or 6 guilds, and each of them has a pair of types of territories that they need. So you might think that you have a lot of power in one area, but then as soon as you upgrade one thing, all the other dials start to switch. And that's what this game really feels like. And then all of these swiveling circles and dials.
I feel like I have too loosely used this in other videos, but this game definitely deserves it. Brain burner.
Brain burner. You need an accountant when you're doing this game. I almost feel like you need like a referee on the side, and that every time someone makes a move, that referee suddenly rejigs everything so you can see what's going on. Because often, like, I'll play an action card.
There should be an online version.
I'm sure there is going to be an online version. There's an online version of a lot of these board games, which is great. Yeah, to do all this stuff for you. I play a card, I do an action, and then I'm starting to refigure everything else, which affects maybe what you're going to do.
And
then when you're doing your action, I say, oh, okay, you did that, now I gotta...
every action affects every person, because what you do is going to affect me and our third player.
You choose 4 action cards, and they're in your color.
And you have to choose them at the beginning. So
the beginning of the round, right? Mm-hmm. So sometimes you may choose something that, unless you play it immediately, or depending on what order you're going to do it, sometimes things get rejigged, and then you're like, oh, now it's not useful. For example, I had a harvest card, and for a harvest card to work, you need a farm that you control.
And you had a farm.
I had a farm, so I was all ready to farm it and have a harvest.
I placed an influence where his farm was, and then I had 2 and he had 1, so I overthrew. And he's like, I'm going to play a farm.
I don't have a farm. So then that card went to waste for me.
You're like...
Right. Whoa. That one went to... Well, I guess I'm wearing glasses, so I'm okay.
Yeet.
Yikes. These are safety glasses more than anything else around you these days.
And then one thing that I find really funny or nice about the art is how all the cards, you can see how they have a person. They have the person there, and they need that dice or pawn to do that action. And like this one,
you get extra actions if you have characters there.
It shows a picture of lumber. You spend wood. This one shows a picture of the merchant, and if you have a merchant out, you get to do that extra action.
They call that the advanced game. In the instructions, you don't have to play with the lower half, but I don't see how you couldn't play the game with it.
But we didn't do the part of the game called something I can't remember.
Oh, reefs.
Reefs.
Or reeves or something like that.
Reeves.
We were so close to playing the game, and then all of a sudden, like, I realized, oh, there's this one other thing where you could up the point values. Game 2, we'll figure out that stuff. Overall, I had a really great time with the game. It is, I don't know if the word is confusing, complex. I don't want to give it a negative spin by saying convoluted, because that always sounds negative. But convoluted in the best way.
It's convoluted in a good way.
Yes, and it definitely entices me to play again. And I think the second or third times the game would go faster.
Easier.
Right, and you would kind of build a strategy around really what happens, rather than it just kind of clicking along.
So it's strategic and tactical at the same time.
It is, and I like that. And there's always interaction. Sometimes in a Euro game, and that's really what this is, a Euro game.
There's not a lot of interaction.
You're doing your thing, and sometimes...
But this is... It looks like a huge board, but with the amount of spaces, it's small enough that at least in a 3-player game, I don't know about a 2-player, we haven't
played 2-player as of yet.
There's not enough spaces so that everyone is like intertwined and doing things. And
yeah, there's a lot of interaction, and one thing becomes another. There's constant evolution and transformation, and the monks' rosary beads become the royal seals, or the other way around. The royal seals can become monk's beads, and then later on, if you harvest, the monk's beads can become...
Oh, because from pushing of the princess lady can turn the seals into beads, and then if you buy a bead and harvest, use the bead, take resources, then the bead turns back into a seal.
Or you could buy the seals directly from the princess.
But then that might mess up something else.
This is a game that I find is intriguing and really a lot of fun to play, and I just feel like you have to play the game 5 or 6 times to really probably understand all the things.
It was funny because like the first time we were playing, there was always something else that I didn't know how to do.
And and then there were some things that we never did in the game, like the starving thing, or
starve the people.
You have 11 cards, but really, I would say probably 5 or 6 of them are used constantly. The guild card is the most important in my estimation.
Guild card. So it's the guild card, and then it's guild, influence, move,
and then the migration, which gets you guys on the board,
and then the couple of cards that apply to your strategy, which would be harvest,
taxation,
and
improve, and with the cities or the towns rather, the explore cards,
and then the explore cards that's
with the outposts.
Yeah, all of those, and then the ×2 was also pretty important.
You're starting to see how much there is. You start outposts are the lowest ranked, but they give you some abilities. Then the next thing is farms, then towns, and then finally feudum. I'm giving the game, at this point in my experience, I'm giving it an 8.25.
Oh, I'm going to give it an 8.
So 8.12, I'm going to say 8.
8.125.
8.125.
8.125 is the official Justin and Max Games rating of Feudum.
Feudum!